Of the nearly 12 dozen members of the Medill Hall of Achievement, a select few deserve the title of master writer, with books that will reverberate through the generations. You know, it's the journalist's lament that today's newspaper or this month's magazine or last year's book become tomorrow's fish wrap or birdcage liner. And online journalism can have an even shorter shelf life. It's all too rare that there are books that endure. And this brings me to Hope Edelman, whose writing has had such a profound impact on people from around the world. Hope was just 17, a year before she entered Medill, when her mother died of breast cancer. She headed for her local library to search for books that would help her to understand, as she put it, how I was supposed to feel, how to think about it, how to talk about it, and whether, if anything, would ever make me feel happy again. She found nothing of use in the library. So fast forward a decade to 1991, the second year that Hope was an instructor in Medill's chair program. She posted notes around Evanston asking women to call her in the cherub dorm if they had suffered the loss of their mother at an early age, and if they wanted to talk about it. Now, in those pre-cell phone days, virtually the entire cherub staff shared one telephone and one answering machine in the dorm, and we all took a lot of messages for Hope that summer. When first issued 3 years later, Motherless Daughters became virtually an instant bestseller and has been in print ever since. Published in 11 languages in 16 countries with well over 500,000 copies sold. Reviewers praised it as absorbing, moving, honest, profound, groundbreaking, brutally honest, exhaustively researched, gently crafted, oddly comforting, painful yet reassuring, tender, sometimes wrenching, cathartic. It has led to 3 sequels, and it has fostered, often with Hope's help, the creation of Motherless Daughters support groups throughout the United States and abroad. This July, when Hope was on campus for a week to teach in the chair program, she met with a Northwestern undergrad who wanted to start a group on this campus. Now, Hope has written on many subjects for a large variety of media and is starting to work on her 7th book. Still, it will be hard to imagine anything that will have a greater impact than Motherless Daughters. Even today, nearly 20 years after publication, that book continues to generate online discussions and blogging. Here's a June 2012 posting from Sydney, Australia. And the woman writes, "Thank you, Hope Edelman. As all of you know, the book Motherless Daughters by Hope Edelman has inspired me in so many ways. It has helped so many girls and women around the world on that sometimes very difficult and heart-wrenching journey through life without their mothers. Call me emotional, but it makes me cry to think of the power of that book. Hope, you are an amazing person, and I wanted to thank you again for writing this book. This one's for you." So Hope, this is for you, and it's such a pleasure to be here today to welcome you, I think, as the 141st member of the Hall of Achievement. Hope Edelman.
It is enormously humbling and exciting to be here today, to be standing here and to be added to a roster of such incredible, illustrious journalists, including many of my former professors. I graduated from Medill in 1986, which already feels like the dark ages on campus because so much has changed in journalism since then, and Medill has been so nimble at adapting and keeping up with all of the innovations. I date back to a time in Medill before magazine and broadcast tracks, long before the McCormick Tribune Center, back in an era when undergrads were taught mostly by seasoned, hard-nosed former Chicago newspapermen from the Tribune, the Sun-Times, the Herald-American, the Daily News. And I say newspaper men because my professors at Medill during my time here were exclusively male. There may have been one or two women on faculty at the time, but they were never at the helm of any classes that I took. And so these newspaper men became a revolving cast of pseudo-father figures to all of us who came through the program in the early and mid-'80s. Like Chuck, I know exactly where I'm going to put this plaque in my house. I'm going to put it in my kitchen. So my two daughters, ages 10 and 14, can look at it every morning when they eat breakfast. And so that I can say, hey, I'm more than just the one around here who makes French toast and packs lunch boxes. But also to say, look at what women can achieve. And you can too. Well, during my time here, there were three professors in particular who influenced me greatly and who I still think about and refer to as a teacher myself all the time. I teach now in the MFA program at Antioch University in Los Angeles, graduate students getting their master's degree in creative nonfiction. After leaving Medill, I worked in magazines, and then I went to the University of Iowa writing program to get my master's degree in creative nonfiction. And that's what I teach now. And my books, all of my books, have been a perfect marriage of those two degrees. I can't think of having had a better training to be the kind of writer that I became. All of my reporting and interviewing and research skills from Northwestern perfectly married with my training in creative writing to create all of these books, which all have a memoir component, but also are deeply steeped in research. So the three professors who helped me most here and who I remember were in this order. The first was Abe Peck. He was the director of the graduate magazine program when I was here. He very generously took under his wing an undergraduate who loved magazines and helped me secure an ASME internship in the summer of 1985, where I went to New York and worked for Don McAllister's company in the MetLife building. Got fantastic training in magazine production, which I brought back here to apply to my work as a senior. Abe also helped me secure my first job at the now defunct Whittle Communications in Knoxville, Tennessee, after I graduated, where I lived right outside the Smoky Mountains for 3 years in an enormously creative crucible of writers and editors and artists and designers that Chris Whittle had put together in the South. Abe lives in Santa Barbara now. He's only 90 minutes north of where I live in Los Angeles, and I do get to see him frequently, actually. It's a treat to see him on the West Coast. He would have liked to be here today, but globetrotting Abe is on the road, as he often is. He's at the Cutter campus right now. He emailed last night to send his regards. So I honor him in spirit today. The second professor was someone who taught my magazine writing class during my senior year. It was Pierce Hollingsworth, who's with us here today. Pierce taught feature writing. It was the only magazine class at the time. I knew already that I wanted to go into magazine work. I was, in fact, a terrible news writer. Terrible. I believed that the most interesting part of the story lived at the bottom of the inverted pyramid. I wanted to be down there with the details of the facts and the stories that were happening after the news, after the news started to dissipate. And so I knew that it was going to be feature writing and magazine editing for me. Pierce's encouragement and guidance cemented my decision to pursue magazine work and later to study creative nonfiction. The third professor who I'd like to mention today is no longer with us, but he lives on rather loudly in the memories of all of my former classmates. I'm referring to Richard Haney. He was the former executive editor at the Chicago Tribune. He received his bachelor's and master's degrees from Medill in 1945. He came on board as a full professor in 1980, and he's also had been inducted into the Hall of Achievement. Was there anyone here who studied with Professor Haney or taught with him? Oh, okay. He was unforgettable, demanding, uncompromising, cantankerous as hell. Dick Haney browbeat an entire cohort of students into journalistic excellence. I don't have a single former classmate who has forgotten the image of him with that snow white hair and the spiky, bristly mustache and the rumpled shirt sleeves and tie, looming over us from the head of the sophomore news writing class, shouting, "Omit needless words, omit needless words," like some kind of crazed apparition of William Strunk. He terrified me, terrified me. And then one day, and with great trepidation, I had to go to his office to discuss my trend story about animal euthanasia. He leaned back in his swivel chair, he crossed his arms, he stared at me. This was not a good beginning to our meeting. And then he told me that this particular topic was very close to his heart because every weekend he visited the local pound to take dogs for a walk so they could enjoy a final morning outside before they were put down. And that's the Dick Haney that I grew to know and respect, and I would say even to revere. As a professor, he was unparalleled. He taught me to be a meticulous writer, to strive for the highest standards of accuracy and perfection in everything that I produced, to fact-check everything, and to never, ever, ever confuse among and between. I feel that all of my finest qualities ever as a writer can be dated back to that classroom, my sophomore year, 1983. As my advisor on teaching newspaper, I was sent to Salem, Oregon. I arrived in Salem, Oregon just as Dean Ed Bassett was coming to Medill. And Dick Haney was my advisor. He once called the newsroom there. I remember answering the phone at my desk and shouted at me to march into the editor-in-chief's office and demand to be given articles more challenging than stories about United Way. I believe he even said, "Why are you still sitting there, Edelman? Get up." And to my own surprise and out of pure fear, I guess I did, I went to the new editor, and I started landing plum assignments after that conversation. I think less because of my talent as a news writer than to my sheer Chicago chutzpah and Dick Haney-inspired pluck. But it worked, and it taught me a very valuable lesson. Professor Haney, as everyone remembers, was a stickler for the rules. And those core principles that Chuck just talked about. In my 26 years since leaving Medill, I've actually discovered that many of the rules Professor Haney taught us about news writing and reporting can be applied equally well to life at large. So I compiled a short list for you of Dick Haney's rules for the young journalist. Each one of them is pulled verbatim from my actual news writing notebook from the fall of '83. Everything that came out of that man's mouth was quotable, and I found my old news writing notebook and I saw that I was just writing things in quote marks that he'd actually said. So these are his words. I think the list can just as easily be called Dick Haney's rules to live by, but you'll see what I mean, so I'll share them with you right now. Number one, avoid the first person. Excellent advice, I think, to guard against self-absorption and myopia in your writing and in your life. I only have to imagine Dick Haney at the front of the class shouting, "It's not about you," to leave skid marks in my fast retreat back to an objective and safer third-person point of view. Number two, don't tailor your findings to match preconceived opinions. That's another way of saying never let your opinion get in the way of the facts. Be probing, but be flexible. Always be open to changing your mind. Number three, always consider a story from the standpoint of the consumer, which is just another way of saying imagine other people's points of view, which is particularly useful for navigating one's way out of workplace arguments and marital scrapes, I've found. Number four, don't assess blame, leave that to the policemen. In real life, don't rush to judgment. Give everyone a fair shake, and take responsibility for your own actions. Don't blame others for your own transgressions or faults. Number five, keep going. Most interviewers quit too soon. Churchill may have said, never, never give in. I like Haney's version better, never, never, never give up. What he meant is be thorough, be probing, be persistent, but also know when you've overstayed a welcome and how to gracefully say goodbye. Number six, remember that sources will lie, flatter, and deceive. People will always tell you what they think you want to hear. In other words, don't accept anything on face value, even your mother's love. I remember that from news writing class too. Follow up. And remember, in real life, as in reporting, what people don't say is often more revealing than what they do. Sometimes the most important parts of an exchange are in the ellipses. Number seven, a good interviewer listens. It's true, as we all know, that most people in this world don't listen. They're just waiting for their turn to speak. So learn how to be quiet. You learn much more from other people than from the sound of your own voice. Number eight, it's okay to be dumb. Admit your ignorance in the interview, not in print. There is no shame in saying, I don't understand. Accept and admit your limitations, be humble, and do it while you still have time to learn. Number nine, keep your tape recorder on until you walk out the door. an apt metaphor, I think, especially as I enter and move through middle age. It means pay attention, be present. Remember, the best parts often come at the very end. And number 10, which is my personal favorite, and one I share with my students all the time, never say what isn't, always say what is. Meaning, be straightforward and forthcoming, leave no room for ambiguity or confusion, be honest, be clear. So in the spirit of Professor Haney, I'm pleased to say today, it is an honor to be here standing in front of you. It is an absolute joy to be accepting this award. I am so very grateful to call myself a Medill alum. Many, many thanks to all of you.